COP22 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, taking place in Marrakech during the first days of November. And it was quite a challenge because it represents the entry in a new phase in the United Nations cooperation on climate action. We have the framework being given by Paris, and the COP in Marrakech was called the COP for Action, to ensure that people started to play. But what is a COP for Action? We could wonder to what extent it is the United Nations, the level where we have to develop action, or to what extent it is on the ground, that we have to ensure that action takes place. The thing we witness in Marrakech is that, of course, we are in the middle of those years where much work has to be developed, we could say, in the shadows. So to ensure that there is a radical shift in the way we understand the regulation frameworks, the way we understand the business strategies, so that we could ensure to fulfill the engagement we took in Paris last year, full decarbonization of our economies and societies and economies much more resilient to the climate impacts. But it's not just on the ground. We also can stress, we can also underline, facilitate action by kind cooperation at the international arena. What we saw in Marrakech was at least three interesting things. The first of them was the fact that everybody studied after these surprising results of the presidential elections in the United States. There was a kind of shock. What could it mean for the climate action in the international context, the arrival of Mr. Trump to the White House? And what we heard was much of we have not decided on the type of future we want to build because of one or another president of the United States, but because we want to breathe clean air, to ensure a future for our society, for our children. So that's quite an interesting reaction. If we compare with the reaction we have already lived 15 years ago when Mr. Bush arrived to the White House. The second thing we witnessed was quite an interesting movement coming from different players, national governments or subnational governments or business. For instance, the 47 countries being grouped in what we call the Climate Vulnerability Forum, so the states that are more vulnerable to the climate impacts, decided to take a very relevant step forward by ensuring that they could be 100% renewables as soon as possible and that they would review their national contribution to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change before 2020. And they had something which is very interesting. They said, we will do it in the context of the development of our 2050 strategies, so to show how we are going to do that. But we invite to the G20 countries to do at least as much as we do. That's quite a compelling, quite a nice appeal to the societies of the richest countries of the world. The second thing we saw was so much willingness to express how we are going to do things. These mid-century strategies, these mid-century pathways to ensure the decarbonization that were provided by different countries, such as Germany, who has already adopted it in the Council, in their cabinet, United States, of course, depending on what Trump's decide to do. But just to start, the Obama's administration wanted to show to what extent this was something feasible and interesting in economic terms and industrial terms and social terms for the United States society. Canada, Mexico, and many others, up to 2020, that have decided to join this platform to promote these mid-century strategies. We also got some other relevant decisions. The most important among them, of course, very procedural but relevant in terms of the organization of the work, is the adoption of the work program for the time to come, to ensure that 2018 will be devoted to this exercise of stock-taking that should ensure we cope with the gap coming from the Paris pledges. Still, not everything is done, but I think that it has been quite an interesting and different experience where the mood of the people attending the COP was much more of curiosity, willing to explore were to find solutions for the challenges, the problems they have already identified as the things to do, the must do in the years to come, than the traditional negotiation mood we have witnessed in the COPs for the last 20 years.